Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Ursula. I'm an indie author of historical fiction and I've been an avid reader since the age of 3. Today I'd like to be discussing a book which I read in 2018 by Maggie Anton, book 1 of the Rashi's Daughters trilogy about Joheved, Rashi's oldest daughter. If you don't know, Rashi was born about 1040 in France. He was one of the greatest Jewish sages, scholars, commentators. The first book printed in the printing press was his, in Hebrew, was his commentary for the Bible, and many Torahs, Chumash, Pentateuch, which we call the first 5 books of the Bible, have Rashi's commentary included, and also at pretty much every mainstream edition of the Talmud has his commentary as well. He was basically just a wonderful, great scholar, and he had 4 daughters, no sons. 3 of his daughters lived to adulthood. They were Joheved, Miriam, and Rahel, and Leah was the youngest daughter. Some people don't believe she existed, but Ms. Anton believed. There is evidence suggesting she did, but just died when she was very, very young and was named after Rashi's mother. And according to tradition, and I believe there's also strong evidence, not just like urban legends, because he had no sons. Rashi taught his 3 surviving daughters Talmud, and they also traditionally wore tefillin, which is the little phylacteries you wrap. There's one box you put on your head, and you wrap the other little box with leather straps around your weaker arm using your dominant arm. And they also wore talit prayer shawls, which you this is like what I have 2 of them, but I only wear them when I go to a conservative shul, because out of respect, I never wear them at an Orthodox service because that's just not their custom. Though there are some very liberal, modern Orthodox synagogues where they do allow women to wear talit, or they have some women-only minions where women are wearing talit by themselves, because there are obviously no men there. But obviously it varies from custom to custom, synagogue to synagogue, and obviously out of respect for my Orthodox friends, I have never worn my talit when I've gone to services there, and I personally don't mind, and it's just as well. So anyway, let's just get on with the book review. I really didn't like this book. I was looking forward to reading it. I was excited when I found it at a used bookstore a few years ago. My parents had bought me the second book about Miriam a number of years ago for my birthday or Hanukkah, but I had never gotten around to reading it. But unfortunately, I had the exact opposite reaction of the crowd from everyone, of course, that frequently happens with me. I don't like books with huge amounts of hype, historical fiction as well as contemporary or world literature. Obviously, this isn't the case for every book, but it's just generally books, everyone's giving 5-star reviews to them, and I don't understand. I feel like, did we even read the same book? So Ms. Anton does get an A+ for research, but a D for storytelling. It's a bunch of ideas and historical facts patched together. The narrative just plods along tediously, and there's no compelling, well-developed characters or strong prose to compensate for that. And she's basically showing off her research, which a lot of historical writers unfortunately do. She's dumping in detailed information that has nothing to do with the purported main story. Like, why do we care about medieval French politics, parchment making, wine making, and Rashi's mother's diary? I mean, that's great you did your research and know what the era you're writing about down to the letter, but if that's not relevant to character development or the main story, why do we even care about that? Save that for another book maybe, or take pride in doing your research and save these essays or research papers you wrote to look back on proudly someday, but just don't put it in a book when it doesn't belong there. And a lot of stilted infodumpy dialogue conveying these details, enough said, why do we care? And there's head hopping deluxe, when we're in too many heads too close together for not enough time each, we're ultimately in no one's head and can't care about the characters. And the trick when you have an ensemble cast, which is obviously lots of characters, you have to weave the point of views, just like a great figure skating program weaves the elements in and out, instead of just dump all the jumps in this part. It's just, you're not even paying attention to what is when, because it just all flows together so beautifully and seamlessly. And obviously most of my books are written in third person omniscient instead of third person limited. It's a great It's a huge surprise to me that my current book I'm writing about Dante and Beatrice ended up in first person. I do plan to do a future vlog talking about why I made that decision and why it felt like the only perfect point of view for that book. But when you are doing third person omniscient, you shouldn't, just hop along from head to head. You need to stay in one person's perspective for at least an entire scene, not necessarily the entire chapter, because like many of my chapters are long and they have multiple sections in them, but you just need to take care. You're not just, oh, now I'm in a character A's point of view and a few sentences later, oh, I'm in character B and now I'm in character C and back to character A. I mean, like, why are we going to care about these people if we're not getting tight in that one person's point of view for a long time, and particularly if that isn't even like an important character or someone we're ever going to see again. By the time an actual plot finally emerged over 200 pages in, I was long past caring about anyone, at least in A Farewell to Arms, which bored me stiff. I felt bad for the baby for about 2 seconds. And the sex scenes, they're just awful. They're like medieval Jewish porn fantasies. And it was like completely ridiculous that she shows Rashi giving fairly graphic sex advice to his own daughters and son-in-law and giving his son-in-law intimate details about his own sex life. That is just something that not would ever happen. Like, it, not even in like the Jewish community traditionally, you wouldn't talk about that with children of the opposite sex. I mean, you may give like some advice to the children of your own sex, or perhaps to like if you're really, really close to your children-in-law, but that's just generally not something you would do. That's just completely a shanda, a shame. And enough already with the unrealistic trope of virgins having a mind-blowingly awesome first time. When I've shared sex scenes from like excerpts on my blog, it means a lot to me. A lot of people have complimented me on how like emotionally realistic they are. They're not just, oh, we're going to have an awesome time even though we've never had sex with anyone before. Like one of the people is a virgin and the other isn't. I mean, there's a lot of things that have to happen for it to be good. I don't want to get too graphic or anything. I don't intend this like as an adult or erotic blog channel, but it's just, you can't just show them having a mind-blowingly awesome first time. That rarely happens for most people for just many reasons. And I am told there's a young adult version of these novels, presumably with the sex taken out, but it's just, it just didn't belong there. It's just so vulgar and like out of place. I just can't find words to express how like shocking that was and just like historically and Jewishly inaccurate. And I also didn't like, it's not accurate to show men waiting outside the mikveh for their wives and gossiping who went there. That's just utterly ridiculous. Like, Taharat Hamishpaha, family purity, is an extremely private mitzvah, and many women didn't discuss this with other women until a few decades ago. You're not supposed to you're not supposed to know who went there, especially if she's your sister, mother, or rabbi's daughter. And brother wouldn't oversee his own sister's immersions. I mean, come on, that's utterly ridiculous. And I don't really think it was common for women to regularly come to synagogue in that era. I mean, sure, for like holidays and Shabbos, but for like, regular weekday minyan in the 11th century, that just seems kind of hard to believe. I mean, that wouldn't have been something that Jewish women regularly did. It's always been, traditionally home-based for them, which is why I know a lot of people have an issue with this line, and it personally does kind of give me a pause. I mean, I know the real reason for it. There's that traditional line in the morning blessings, thank you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has not made me a woman. The traditional real reason for that is because women are exempt from time-bound mitzvot, like, praying 3 times a day, and men are, because, they have less like family and home obligations than women traditionally did. It would have been like unfair, like for much of history, to ask like a woman who had lots of children and a household to run to just, drop everything and go to a full prayer service 3 times a day and do all these other things men do. Well, and now in the conservative and reform and other non-orthodox movements, that prayer is substituted for thank you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has made me according to his will. And, it's just, well, obviously in that era, women, I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but it just really wasn't common for women to do that. They wouldn't have had, the time or interest. That was just a men's domain. And Either someone like confused the dating or Ms. Anton sourced her characters. If you don't know, SORAS stands for a soap opera rapid aging syndrome. You probably know if you've watched any soap operas, like one day this character is like a baby or toddler, and like the next day suddenly he or she is like a preteen or a teenager, and like sometimes, many times, the parents haven't even been together as long as that child supposedly has now been alive. It's like totally ridiculous. So like the timeline in the beginning says Joheved was born in 1059, but she's 12 when the story opens in 1069. And the second sister Miriam, her birth year is given as 1062, but she's 9 when the story opens. And Joheved's husband Meir is depicted as 4 years older, yet he was born circa 1060, so only about a year older than she was. And speaking of, I had no sense of these girls growing up. I know there wasn't really any concept of adolescence in the Middle Ages, but I never had a feeling for how old they were at any given time, or going on a coming-of-age journey with them. It just felt like they were sorest. There was zero character development, enough said. Another thing that was utterly ridiculous from like a Jewish perspective, the premarital kissing and making out. Traditional Orthodox couples aren't even allowed to be alone without a chaperone or hold hands before marriage. And every time a conflict appeared, it was quickly resolved, like when Rashi catches Joheved and Meir making out before they're married. The blurb makes it sound like this story is about Meir's disapproval of Joheved's Talmud study, but he's totally cool with it after his initial shock. It was extremely unusual for Jewish women, even most men in that era, to be so educated, but we never gauge any long-term reactions to this from anyone. They're like, oh, this is shocking for like a few minutes or like a few weeks or whatever, and then they'll be fine with it or like never mention it again. So that would have been something that would have surprised and scandalized many people in that era. You can't just like brush it over or make it seem like it's totally normal. And the narrative was constantly interrupted to define or explain things, sometimes in parentheses. Like, this is why you really should have a glossary when you have like a multicultural or historical book, so you don't like interrupt the narrative, like the forward momentum of the story. Just they can look up like what a holiday or historical reference means in the glossary, or the building. Sometimes like front matter, you can do like notes about things or different things in the back matter. I do have a number of blog posts about that, possibly when I can do some vlogs about this also. And there was a reviewer on Amazon and Goodreads who explained in a lot of detail how the depictions of births and midwifery aren't accurate. And this is like a fairly big part of the story, because the second daughter, Miriam, like wants to become a midwife and is an apprentice. So there are a number of birth scenes throughout the book. And this one also really grinded my gears. The word gender was anachronistically used in place of sex 6 times, including twice in dialogue. People in the 11th century did not use that word in that way, ever. It only became a euphemism for sex in the late 20th century, thanks in large part to the vile Dr. John Money and his grotesque experiment with poor David Reimer. The Victorians were not afraid to say sex when they were referring to being male or female. So this just really jumps out at me. You have to, obviously I understand there are some words you use that you genuinely weren't aware were anachronistic. I don't mean like words that are obviously tied to the 20th century or like a certain very, very contemporary thing. Sometimes the word is just so common you think it's a lot older than it is, but there are certain words that you should know going in that were not used in that way in that era, or just weren't existing at all. So that's something you really need to keep in mind when you're writing historical, like check words and make sure they were used in that era or they existed. Rashi and his daughters, who really did study Talmud and that pray with tefillin and talit, deserved so much better. I'm told the second book depicts Miriam's husband Benjamin as openly gay, and the community just anachronistically accepts this. I probably will read the second book just for curiosity when my books, Baruch Hashem, come out of storage soon, but I probably am not going to like it very much. And the third book about Rachel, I don't know if I'll like that very much either. But again, Ms. Anton does deserve an A+ for research. She's just not particularly good storyteller, and I'm very surprised and shocked at all these wonderful reviews for the books, because again, I presume a lot of people who do this to I wouldn't call this historical fiction light so much as just, not coherently coming together well with the storytelling and the researching, and just creating a beautiful blend where you don't even notice. Like I said, you need to put the elements throughout instead of you weave them in and out. You don't just like cluster and dump in the historical background here, and then there's like narrative, and then there's more like history out of nowhere. Just put them all together. So you need to just be sure you're writing historically accurate things, not, gossip girl in period clothes. So I don't think, I will enjoy these future books very well. So I'll see you maybe on Sunday for my next vlog. I might be doing the BookTube newbie tag then, or I might be doing some other vlogs about what I'm writing, like my alternative history I'm writing right now. I know Preptober for NaNoWriMo is coming up, and I'm going to be obviously continuing with my work in progress, hopefully Baruch Hashem, getting at least 50K. I overachieve every year. I was really disappointed last year because of lockdown. I only got 53K, and at least half of that was from like creative nonfiction instead of the work in progress I was editing. But hopefully I will get to doing like 2 or 3 vlogs a week from now on, and hopefully I'm becoming more confident on camera. So see you guys later. Bye.